My lovely, lovely, wonderful people, a pleasant afternoon to you. If you have not yet made Jesus Christ your personal Lord and Savior, do so now, 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 now. He's the best being ever. Certainly, that would be the best decision you could ever make. You don't need to seek any other medium to get, that unction, that power, that authority, that fire, that, vim, that vigor, that healing, that peace, that favor, that blessing. Don't need to seek any other medium but God, and that's just a sad reality. We live in a world where people tend to do that. But, I want to talk about something here specifically, and that has to do with, there's some controversial things that are happening, currently in our country. Very, very sad situation, very unfortunate. I am not one here to judge anyone, I leave judgment unto God. And when we talk about coming to judgments, I've often said we all have to come to judgment calls. Is what God is basically saying is that ensure that you don't come to false judgment, and ensure that even if it is that you're correcting somebody through just means, through fair means, that you do so in love. You ensure, because you can fall in the very trap that individual has fallen into. You can be tempted to fall into that trap as well. Some versions will say, yes, that is why when you're correcting people, ensure that you do it with love. Please. I've heard people saying that people have selective, what is the word? I just remember the word and it slipped me. It's basically saying they basically reprimand and they hit out against, or they, speak out against things that suit them or that they specifically don't like, So it's like a sort of, it's hypocritical, but it is a selective backlash. That's not the term that I want to use. And we have to be very careful. That is not necessarily true. I'm sure that we have millions of people on social media. TikTok probably more than likely being the most popular one among all right now. The leading, I'm assuming it's a leading social media platform. The newest in terms of popular, because you have so many of them out there that I've heard of, like, ugh. And the one that it's the most popular. If I speak out against sin overall, doesn't matter, and you only have a handful of people listening, and then you may see selective outrage on another matter that is spread like wildfire, you're going to come to the conclusion that nobody else has spoken about it, and that is not true. There are people who have spoken about things that are not good, not selective outrage, because they don't like this particular bad thing or sinful thing, or they don't like that particular bad or sin thing. There are people who leak out across the board. The reality is this, though. Let me put this clause in. All of us, barring none, every last one of us, I don't care who you want to be, we have biases, prejudices, and discriminatory thinking. We are all hypocritical in some sense, meaning there are some, I use the word sinful things for you to understand so we can communicate effectively. There are some wrongdoings, misconducts, breaches, unlawful acts, unethical acts, if you want me to put it that way, or sinful acts that may not disturb you as another thing. So somebody, I think I've heard people say, they're rather a thief than a liar. You have some people who say, if I had to choose between the two evils, they'd rather, maybe, as I said, choose the thief than the liar. Some people may say, I'd rather the fornicator than the adulterer. I'm just using that for you to understand that you have some things that will not disturb you. Everything won't be at 100% decibel. People will hit out and say any sin is sin and it's not good. But if somebody were to break it down and really dissect it, they may say to you that this one doesn't really irk me like this one. When I hear of this particular thing, maybe because they have been affected by it in a bad way, or they know of people who have been affected by it in a bad way, or they've seen the devastation of some of them. Because even though sin is sin, some carry more weight than some. We have to agree with that. Some things carry more weight than some. If you, for example, commit adultery or fornication, for what we understand it to be, it may not have any legal ramifications. It may just be immoral. But if you commit murder, if you steal, if you lie where somebody gets hurt or whatnot, you can be charged and locked up and put away for life, depending on the nature of it. So some things, and by that token, I'm saying that's why some things will carry more weight than some. When David committed adultery, but when he also set up the man to die, it's like God said, sword will never leave you home. As much as he was a man after God's own heart, as much as God says, somebody from your lineage will always be leading, and in the, be whether a king or queen, somebody will be leading. But because he allowed murder to be committed, this is what took place. So that would have superseded as much as bad as the adultery was. He took somebody's life. They're no longer on earth. They're permanently gone. While with the adultery can fix your situation if they were still alive. If you get me. I had to take it down to the granular level for you to understand it. Stop saying people have selective outrage. Not necessarily. We're not always going to feel the same way about every wrongdoing. We're not. But I can't explain why. It's just that way. Maybe it's just that we do. Can you imagine you're burdening yourself with everything? That would be too much on us. That would be too much burden. To leave that to God. That is why judgment should be left in God's hands. That is why he says, vengeance is mine, I will repay. I don't need to be equally angry with somebody who murders versus somebody who lies versus somebody who steals, somebody who covets their neighbor. Can you imagine you take on all of that burden and your anger level goes up at a high decibel at all of them? You would lose your mind. Your brain would blow. Your brain would blow. So with that reality, it may come across that people have selective outrage. It's not necessarily that. Some misconduct, some breaches, some unlawful acts, or however you want to describe it, or sinful acts carries more weight than some. It creates more problems than some. So that is why you probably have people will talk about some things and they're cultured that way too. You know what I mean? They're cultured a particular way. So as they hear of a particular thing, they will be a little bit more incensed because they know the far-reaching ramifications of that versus something else. You know what I mean? Versus something else. So you will have people. So it's not necessarily a matter of selective outrage. Again, if I am speaking in generally against certain things and barely anybody share it or barely anybody look at it, you're going to assume that nobody speaks out against it. And that is why you may make the assumption that there is selective outrage. Not true. If we were to search the internet far and wide and just type in people who hit out against basically anything that just seems to be wrong and unlawful or unethical or whatever it is, you'd be surprised to see the number of people who come up. We have to be careful when we hear people selling a story because it will water down the other misconducts that have happened. And I'm saying that especially in light of the fact that I saw a particular thing. I follow this guy. I didn't agree with him on something, when they were talking about why is it that they're hitting out against Valiant's song and not hitting out against the pastor with the with the adultery situation. There are people who are, but it doesn't mean that we're not going to hit out against what Valiant has done. And even he may not hear the people who are lambasting her, but there are people who are. There are people who are. You know what I mean? There are people who are. And it doesn't mean that they can't, so it has nothing to do with selective outrage. It's just that you may not come across the people who are being fair, and the reality is, again, we have to be even careful in how we hit out. Ensure that when we're doing it, we do it with the knowledge that we too are flawed, we too are mere mortals, and we too can fall in the very same trap. No matter how you feel you cannot, you can. The number of people who have said, boy, never, and when they look, they say they can't believe that and they really meant it, when they say never will they ever do this, never. The flesh is weak. The flesh is frail. The flesh is finite. Some things, when trouble sets in or adversity sets in or some vulnerable situation sets in, you say, how did I even end up here? You know how many people have said that? So, but be careful. It's not necessarily selective outrage. You just miss it. Guys, you know what to do. Read TikTok and YouTube. Subscribe. Give me one of those lines. Follow me on Instagram.